My name is Allison Murphy. I am 73 years old, and I have been a widow for 10 years. My husband Hubert died of a heart attack, leaving me alone in this big house we bought when we were young, scraping together the down payment penny by penny. The Crestwood neighborhood in Rock Springs was considered a suburb then, but now it's an upscale place where land costs a fortune. Our bakery, Sweet Memories, not only fed us, but helped put 3 children on their feet. I made myself a coffee, a little ritual left over from the days when you had to get up at the crack of dawn to bake the first buns for the opening. Hubert always insisted on good coffee. Al, he used to say, you can save money on anything but coffee. It's the only thing that keeps me liking early rises. The sound of an automobile was heard outside. Someone had pulled up in front of the house, even though the clock on the microwave only showed 8 in the morning. No one comes to Rock Springs unannounced, especially this early. I went to the window and saw the shiny black SUV of Paisley, my oldest daughter. So there would be another conversation about moving to a quiet, comfortable place for people your age, Mom. I sighed and went to open the door before Paisley started drumming her perfectly manicured nails. With each passing year, she reminded me more and more of my grandmother, my mother-in-law Gladys, who in her lifetime had constantly tried to control our marriage to Hubert. Sometimes I think this trait is passed down through generations. My mother-in-law, my daughter, both of whom think they know best how I should live my life. Mommy! Paisley didn't come in, but literally flew into the house, scrutinizing the hallway. Why didn't you answer the phone last night? I was worried. Hello, darling. I tried to hug my daughter, but she was already moving toward the kitchen, clacking her high heels on the wooden floor. I'm fine. I just decided to go to bed early. You can't just decide to go to bed, Mom. What if something happens? A fall? A seizure? Paisley made it sound like I was 93 instead of 73. Ralph and Sybil and I had already talked about installing a panic button. There's not going to be any buttons in my house, I said, pouring another cup of coffee for my daughter. I'm doing just fine on my own. Paisley grimaced, but took the cup. She glanced around the kitchen as I thought, meticulously searching for signs of my failure. Crumbs on the table, unwashed dishes, expired food. She found none of these. After 50 years in the bakery, I was used to cleanliness. Rachel Porter, she said the name of a colleague from her law firm, recently got her mother a job at Sunset Manor. It's heaven, Mom. Private apartments, medical care, swimming pool, and thousands of dollars a month. I finished for her. No, thank you. I'm not going to spend money to sit in a golden cage with old ladies like me and discuss our ailments. But your house, it's huge for one person. Paisley's voice was filled with ill-concealed irritation. The cleaning, the heating, the repairs. It's crazy money, Mom. I sipped my coffee, looking at my daughter over the top of the cup. That was it. Talking about money and the house again. Paisley and her brother and sister had had their eye on the property for a long time. Not because they wanted to live here, God forbid, but because of the value of the land. Sell it, split the money, and forget about the old mother who had the nerve not to want the same thing. There came the sound of another car. Ralph's sports car appeared in the driveway, defiantly red and obscenely expensive for a man of his age. Oh, Ralph's here. I didn't hide my surprise. To what do I owe this attention? Family council, Paisley said, and went out to greet her brother, leaving me alone with my troubled thoughts. Ralph burst into the house with the energy of a tornado. My son had always been like that, a hurricane in human form. Even at 44, he retained that trait. Mommy, he picked me up and twirled me around like a little girl. You look amazing. That new haircut, it suits you. It was the same haircut I'd had for the last 20 years, but Ralph was never very observant when it came to the stock market. Put Mama down. Paisley said irritably. You're gonna hurt her back. Oh, come on, Pace, Ralph said. Mom's a tough nut to crack. Isn't she, Mom? I just shook my head. Those two hadn't gotten along since they were kids. Where's Sybil? I asked, coming back into the kitchen. She'll be here any minute. Ralph plopped down in a chair. She's making some kind of video for her subscribers. Something about a successful woman's morning routine or something. I remembered how proud Hubert had been of our kids. Look at them, Al, he used to say. They're going to fulfill our unfulfilled dreams. I wonder what he'd say now. Paisley with her clinical obsession with her career, Ralph, who changes women like gloves and gambles the stock market with his clients' money, and Sybil, my youngest, who's chosen the profession of showing her life on the internet. Before we could talk, another car pulled up. Mommy, she threw herself on my neck. You're getting better. So, Paisley tapped her fingernails on the table. Now that we're all here, let's get down to business. What business? I felt my muscles tense. A bad feeling was building. Mom, we're worried about you, Paisley began in her legal tone. This house is too big. It needs constant upkeep. And it's worth a fortune, Ralph interrupted, smiling. You're sitting on a gold mine, Mom, and you're living like a humble pensioner. That's because I am, I cut him off. But you could have gotten at least $1.5 million for the house. Ralph spread his hands. Can you imagine what life would be like? A life without the house I'd lived in for half a century? Without the garden that your father and I planted seedling by seedling? Without the kitchen where you did your homework and I baked cookies? I could feel my voice shaking. No, thank you. Sybil rolled her eyes. Mom, they're just walls. You'll take the memories with you. Honey, Paisley put her palm on my hand. We talked to your doctor. You did what? I yanked my hand away. What right do you have to discuss my health behind my back? We're your children, Paisley said firmly, and we're concerned about your condition. Dr. Jenkins thinks you'd be better off in a place with round-the-clock care. I stood up abruptly, feeling the blood rush to my face. Dr. Jenkins can think whatever he wants, but it's my decision, and I choose to stay in my house. Mother, be reasonable, Ralph intervened. It's just a building. Sell it, live in a luxurious boarding house, and there'll be money left over to give to you? I crossed my arms over my chest. That's what this is about, isn't it? You can't wait to get your share of the inheritance while I'm alive? All three of them started to object at the same time, but I knew I'd hit the mark. The house was on a prime piece of land, and developers had been offering 6 figures for years. Every year the price went up, and my kids felt they were missing out on a bargain. Look, Mom. Sybil sat down on the armrest of my chair. We just want the best for you. Sunset Manor has everything you need. Companionship, care, security. And what if I say no? I asked you bluntly. There was silence. The children looked at each other, and I realized that they had come up with a plan. Then, Paisley began slowly, we suggest another option. Let's discuss it after breakfast. I brought your favorite croissants. I looked at my children, so mature on the outside and so immature on the inside. Hubert always said our biggest mistake was that we let them do too much, did too much for them. One day we'll be gone, Al, he warned, and they'll have to manage on their own. But he'd gone first, and now I was paying for our parenting mistakes. Okay, I said finally. Let's have breakfast and talk. But be warned, this house is not for sale. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. I could see in their faces that the family council was just beginning, and the hardest part was yet to come. And somehow I was sure that croissants were the only good thing to come out of the day. I apologize. I'll write the full chapter in one post now. The croissants did turn out delicious, crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. Paisley knew just how to placate me. My oldest daughter has always had a knack for manipulating people. It made her a successful lawyer. I watched as my children settled at the kitchen table, the same table where Hubert and I had once fed them breakfast before school. Ralph had already poured his third cup of coffee. Sybil was sneakily snapping pictures of the food for her followers, and Paisley was staring at me expectantly, like a chief prosecutor interrogating a particularly dangerous criminal. So, I wiped my hands with a napkin. What other option do you have for me? The children looked at each other. It was strange to see that silent exchange of glances. At one time, I could read their thoughts, but now they were communicating in a language I couldn't understand. Mom, Paisley began, we understand your attachment to home, and we respect that feeling. We really do. But, I raised an eyebrow. In my years of motherhood, I'd learned to recognize when words were followed by but. But we need to think about your future, Paisley continued. Your safety, your health, your well-being. Dr. Jenkins said that at my age, people can still make their own decisions. I interrupted. So I decided to stay home. Ralph sighed and set the cup aside. Mom, let's be honest. You live alone in a 6-bedroom house. It's unsustainable. Irrational? I chuckled. Since when did feelings become rational? This is my home. Every corner of it holds memories of your father, of you as children. This is where I feel like myself. Emotional attachment to possessions is normal, Sybil interjected, as if she were quoting some trendy psychology podcast. But sometimes we need to let go of material things in order to move on. I struggled to keep from saying that the only possessions I should be getting rid of were them, my adult children, who still thought I was a purse on legs. Look, I tried to speak calmly. I understand your concern, but Sunset Manor is not an option. I don't want to spend the rest of my life playing bridge with other old ladies and waiting for the nurse to bring me pills. Paisley put her hand on my palm, a gesture that should have looked comforting but felt patronizing. Mom, we did our research. Sunset Manor is the best boarding house in the state. They have their own movie room, swimming pool, weekly excursions. How much does it cost? I asked you directly. About $6,000 a month, Paisley said grudgingly. But selling the house would cover that for years to come. $6,000, the amount Hubert and I had once saved for almost a year to expand the bakery. I shook my head. My answer is no. Mom, Ralph stepped forward, his voice as husky as when he was a teenager asking for money for a new bicycle. Think rationally. This house is your most valuable asset. The real estate market is booming right now, especially in this neighborhood. I'm not selling the house, I said. Not today, not next year, not ever. This was my and my father's house. This is where you grew up. We don't live here anymore, Sybil interrupted. Mom, you're clinging to the past. Life moves on. And yours should too, Paisley added. I got up from the table and went to the window. Outside, I could see the orchard, a lifelong project of mine and Hubert's. The apple trees we'd planted when Paisley was born. The gazebo my husband had built for my 40th birthday. The hammock where Ralph liked to read. All of this wasn't just a possession. It was the materialized history of our family. Mom, Paisley got up too and walked over to me. We're worried. What if you fall? What if something happens at night and no one is around? I'm not a crystal vase, I replied without turning around. I've spent my whole life getting up at 4 in the morning to bake bread. I've survived my husband's death, the bankruptcy of the bakery. You're growing up. I can handle it. Ralph cleared his throat. Then we have a compromise offer. I turned around. Something in his tone made me wary. What was it? I asked. If you insist on staying in the house, we suggest another arrangement, Ralph said slowly, choosing his words. The house belongs to you, but it's essentially our inheritance. As long as you live here alone, we lose the potential income from selling or renting it out. E? I crossed my arms over my chest, feeling the anxiety building inside. And we think it's fair that you pay us compensation for the use of the house, Ralph finished, avoiding the word rent. There was silence for a few seconds. I stared at my son, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Compensation, I repeated slowly. You're suggesting I pay you to live in my own house? Technically, Paisley interjected, the house is legally yours, but economically it's already partially ours, like an inheritance. You mean you want to inherit it while I'm still alive? I couldn't believe my ears. To pay rent on the house I bought with your father? The house you grew up in? Don't call it rent, Mom, Sybil said softly. It's compensation for lost profits. I laughed bitterly, without a trace of mirth. Lost profits. Wonderful. And tell me, my dear children, how much do I owe you for lost profits? The children exchanged glances again, and Ralph, as usual, took up the role of the bad news messenger. We have calculated that a fair amount is $2,000 a month. 2,000, I repeated, feeling a lump in my throat. $2,000 a month for the right to live in my own home. That's well below market rent, Paisley added hastily. Given the neighborhood and the size of the house, we could have asked for 4. I looked at my children, these strangers in the bodies of the babies I'd once carried in my arms. Had they really become like this? Or had they always been and I just hadn't noticed? Are you serious? I asked quietly. Are you seriously suggesting that I, your mother, pay you to have me live in my own house? It's business, Mom. Ralph shrugged. Nothing personal. It's nothing personal, I echoed. Nothing personal about demanding money from your own mother. We just want justice, Paisley said. Think about it. Either you move to a comfortable boarding house where you'll be taken care of, or you pay us compensation for the fact that we can't get the money from the sale of the house because of your stubbornness. I slowly sank down on the chair. My legs wouldn't hold me up. My thoughts were confused. I remembered Hubert saying, Al, money shows the true essence of people. I hadn't realized the depth of that wisdom at the time. Now I did. What if I say no? I asked. If I don't agree to the move or the compensation? Again, the glances. They'd obviously discussed that option beforehand. Then, Paisley began slowly, and I noticed her change to her legal tone. We'll have to consider options for challenging your legal capacity. Given your age and recent doctor's visits for arthritis and blood pressure, you want to declare me incompetent? I couldn't believe what was happening. Take the house away through the courts? We don't want to, Sybil said softly. We'd rather you agreed to one of our options voluntarily. It would be better for everyone. I looked at their faces, so familiar and so foreign. The children I'd raised, the ones I'd given everything to, time, effort, love. For what? For the right to pay for a roof over their heads in their old age? You're disgusting, I said quietly. All 3 of you. Your father would roll over in his grave if he knew what you've become. Mother, Sybil exclaimed, don't be dramatic. Dramatize? I felt a wave of anger rising inside me. You come into my house, eat at my table, and then tell me I have to pay you money to live here? And I'm being dramatic? We just want to protect our financial interests, Paisley said coldly. It's not drama, it's business. Business, I shook my head. Your father and I worked 16 hours a day so you could go to college. We saved money on everything so you could have the best. Was that business too? That's different, Ralph objected. You were our mother. You had to take care of us. And you? I asked, looking each of them in the eye in turn. Don't you owe me anything? Not even basic respect? We respect you, Mother, Sybil said. That is why we are offering you a choice. What choice? I grinned bitterly. Give you the house or pay for it. That's not a choice. That's extortion. I stood up and headed for the door. Go away. What? Ralph looked genuinely surprised. Get out of my house. I pointed to the door. All three of you, now. Mom, you can't just kick us out. Paisley stood up. We're not done discussing this. I'm done. My voice sounded firm, though I was trembling inside. The house belongs to me. I won't sell it or pay you for the right to live here. Then we'll have to go through the courts, Paisley said calmly, as if she were discussing the weather. We can prove that you're incapable of taking care of yourself and making sound financial decisions. Do whatever you want. I opened the door. Now get out. Sybil came over to me and tried to take my hand. Mom, think carefully. We're giving you until the end of the week. Either move to a boarding house or compensation. Otherwise, it'll be worse. I yanked my hand away. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact, Paisley replied, gathering her things. It's the end of the week, Mom. Think about it. They left, all three of them, one by one. First, Ralph, glaring at me with a look of disappointment mixed with irritation. Then Sybil, pulling out his cell phone as he walked. Apparently this was already turning into a post. And finally Paisley, who stopped in the doorway. We're doing this for your own good, Mom. Someday you'll understand. I closed the door behind them and leaned my back against it. My legs wouldn't hold up. My heart was pounding like it was about to jump out of my chest. The only thought pulsing in my head was, my own kids want to take my house away from me. Slowly, I slid down the door to the floor and for the first time in years, burst into tears. 3 days passed in silence. The kids didn't call, didn't write, didn't come over, which was odd considering their ultimatum. The deadline at the end of the week was approaching, but instead of anxiety, I felt a strange calm. It came after the night I'd sat on the floor by the front door and cried until my tears ran dry. Something in me had broken then, and then it had melded differently, tighter. On the morning of the fourth day, I called an old acquaintance of mine, Leonard Price, the lawyer with whom Hubert and I once drew up the paperwork for the bakery. Leonard was almost 80 years old, but his mind was still sharp. Ellie, it's been a long time. His voice sounded as cheerful as it had 20 years before. Hello, Leo. I need counseling. I briefly outlined the situation with the kids. Leonard whistled. Ungrateful bastards. Pardon my bluntness. That's okay. I grinned. I'd used worse words in the last few days. So here's the thing, Ellie. Leonard's voice turned serious. Legally, they can't charge you a dime. The house is yours, period. As for being declared incompetent, it's a long and complicated process. And believe me, with the way you're laying it out so clearly right now, it's a long shot. What if they do sue? Then we'll fight, Leonard said simply. I'm too old for long trials, but for Hubert's sake, and you, of course, I'll take the case. As I hung up the phone, I was relieved. I now had a plan of action, or at least the knowledge that I was legally protected. All that remained was to survive the inevitable confrontation with the kids when their deadline expired. The confrontation happened on Saturday, but not in the way I expected. The day started out normally. I had coffee, read a book in the garden, and then headed to a small supermarket a few blocks from home. As I picked out my groceries, the sky clouded over, and by the time I left the store, it was already drizzling rain. When I got home, I noticed several unfamiliar cars in the driveway. My heart twitched. Could Paisley have brought the bailiffs? No, it was too early for that kind of action. Then what? The answer came as soon as I entered the house. There were voices coming from the living room, many voices. I walked cautiously down the hallway and peered inside. What I saw made me freeze on the threshold. My living room was full of strangers. Men and women of different ages were sitting on couches, standing against the walls, talking amongst themselves. Their clothes were shabby, many of them clearly out of size. Next to the fireplace, I noticed several large bags and backpacks. In the center of the chaos stood my children. Ralph was animatedly explaining something to a tall man with a gray beard. Sybil was taking pictures on her phone, and Paisley was walking toward me as if everything was normal. "Mom, there you are," she said loudly, clearly for the audience. "We wanted to surprise you." "What's going on?" I gripped the handles of the grocery bag tighter. "Who are all these people?" "They're your new neighbors," Paisley announced with a smile. "Since you think the house is too big to share with your family," we thought, "why not share it with people who really need a roof over their heads?" I looked around. Now, looking more closely, I realized who these people were. Homeless. My kids brought homeless people into the house. "What have you done?" I whispered. "Charity, Mom." Ralph came over, putting his arm around my shoulders. "Didn't you teach us to help those in need? Well, here we are. These people don't have a home, and you have a house too big for one person. It's a perfect match, don't you think?" I shook his hand off. "You have no right to bring strangers into my house without my permission." "Actually, we do," Sybil interjected, still on the phone. "You've always said this house is our family home. We're just having guests over." I noticed that some of the guests looked embarrassed. Some were furtively looking at me with obvious discomfort. They clearly didn't realize they had become a tool in the family war. Paisley took me aside, into a small alcove by the stairs. Her voice became quieter but harder. "Listen, Mom, this is our answer to your refusal. Either you agree to our terms, or these people stay here. We've already told them they can live here for free as long as they want." "You can't do that." I tried to speak calmly, even though I was seething inside. "It's against the law." "But we already did." Paisley shrugged. "And by the way, it's completely legal. As your children, we have the right to have guests. And if you try to kick them out, it'll look really bad. A rich landlady throwing poor people out on the street. Think of what that will do to your reputation, especially when Sybil puts the video online." I looked back at the living room, where Sybil continued filming and Ralph was handing out some papers to strangers. "What's in those papers?" I asked Paisley. "Nothing in particular, just an informal agreement that they can stay here indefinitely." She smiled. "With your consent, of course." "I didn't give my consent." "But we said you did. After all, it's word against word. And who will be believed? Three caring children or an elderly woman who may not have an adequate grasp of reality?" I clenched my fists, feeling my nails dig into my palms. Never in my life had I felt such rage. Not even when Hubert had lost his life savings on a bad investment early in our marriage. Not even when Paisley ran away from home for 3 days as a teenager. Even when Ralph was expelled from college for cheating on exams. "Get out of my house," I said, looking Paisley in the eye. "All three of you, now." "Oh, we'll leave," she smiled even wider. "But they'll stay, and they'll stay here until you agree to our terms." I stepped into the living room, trying to assess the situation. There were a lot of strangers, about 20 people. Men, women, even a couple teenagers. Some were already settled on couches and armchairs. Others stood in groups, talking quietly. Ralph, seeing that I was back, came toward me, dragging a short, middle-aged man in a ragged jacket behind him. "Mom, I'd like you to meet Thomas. He'll be staying in the guest bedroom," Ralph said in a deliberately loud voice. "Thomas, this is my mother, Mrs. Murphy. She's very happy to have you in her big house." The man looked confused. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you for your kindness. Your children said you were a philanthropist." "My children lied. I didn't hide the truth." They brought you here without my consent. Thomas took a step back, a look of fear in his eyes. I didn't want to disturb anyone. If you don't mind, I can leave. No, no, Thomas, Ralph intervened, putting a hand on the man's shoulder. My mother is only joking. Aren't you, Mom? He looked at me defiantly. I noticed that Sybil had pointed the phone camera right at me. They were expecting me to lose my temper, start yelling, maybe even try to force these people out. And then they'd have perfect proof of my inadequacy. But I won't give them that pleasure. I apologize for the confusion. I turned to Thomas. I need to speak to my children alone. Please wait. I headed into the kitchen, gesturing for the children to follow me. When all three of them were inside, I closed the door. You're out of line. My voice shook with anger. This isn't just low, it's disgusting. Business is business, Ralph shrugged. You refused our terms, so we found an alternative way to apply pressure. Using poor people with nowhere to go? I couldn't believe his cynicism. They get a roof over their heads. You get the company, we get leverage, Sybil enumerated. Everybody wins. I took a deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts. What did you tell them? That you're a rich, eccentric widow who wants to help the homeless, Paisley replied. That they could live here for free with all the amenities, and that it was your personal charitable initiative. And they believed it? Of course they did. Ralph grinned. They had nowhere else to go. Most of them were picked up at the Elm Street shelter. It's overcrowded. A lot of them get kicked out in 2 weeks. I shook my head. And then what? You think I'm going to get scared and sell the house just to get rid of them? Exactly. Paisley nodded. 20 strangers in your house. They'll use your bathroom, your kitchen, sleep in your bedrooms. How long can you stand it? A day? 2? A week? Sooner or later you'll break down and call us. I looked out the kitchen window. The rain had intensified, drumming on the glass. It was dank and damp outside, not the best weather for someone with nowhere to go. What if I called the police? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Then we'll show them the papers they signed, Paisley said. It says you took them in voluntarily. It'll be your word against 20 signatures. Plus the videos that Sybil's making. Who do you think they'll believe? And Sybil will put it all online, of course. I nodded, understanding their plan. Rich landlady kicks poor homeless people out in the rain. You're quick on the uptake, Mom. Sybil smiled. I've always appreciated that about you. I felt dead tired. How could my own children have become such people? Where had I gone wrong in raising them? All right, I straightened up. You win. I'll consider your offer. Now go away. Paisley smiled. Wise decision, Mom. We'll be waiting for your call. But don't drag it out too long, Ralph added. It's going to get more interesting. They left, all three of them, pleased with themselves, confident of their victory. I stayed in the kitchen, trying to collect my thoughts. There were 20 strangers in my house. My own children were using homeless people as weapons against me. The situation seemed hopeless, but I wasn't used to giving up. With a deep sigh, I walked out of the kitchen and back into the living room. The homeless people fell silent as I entered. Some were staring at the floor. Some were furtively studying the surroundings. Their eyes were filled with a range of emotions: embarrassment, awkwardness, hope. My name is Allison Murphy, I said calmly but firmly. This is my home, and I need to explain something to you. I didn't know what to do with 20 strangers in my house, but I decided to start with the truth. My children lied to you, I said, standing in the middle of the living room. I didn't invite you or plan any charity event. They brought you here to force me to sell the house. There was silence in the room. People looked at each other, some with confusion on their faces, others with embarrassment. We can leave, the tall, gray-bearded man spoke first. We don't want to cause trouble. Where will you go? I asked. It's raining outside, and there's no room at the shelter, I understand. We'll find something, the man shrugged. It wouldn't be the first time. I looked out the window. The rain had intensified into a torrential downpour, kicking these people out now when they were being used against me by my own children. No, I couldn't do that. Stay, I decided. At least for today. No one should be outside in this weather. The gray-bearded man raised his eyebrows in surprise. Are you sure? After your children. My children and I are different people. I squared my shoulders. My name is Allison Murphy. And you are? Oliver Coleman. He bowed slightly. Everyone just calls me Ollie. One by one, they introduced themselves. Besides Ollie and Thomas, who had already been introduced to me, there was Rita, a thin woman with close-cropped gray hair, Jessie, a young girl with tattoos that hid her face under a hood, the elderly couple Nelson and Doris, two young men, Vince and Lucky, a couple of teenagers, Frank and Iris, and a few others whose names I didn't remember at the time. Well, now that we all know each other, I sighed, we need to decide how to proceed. You can stay here tonight. Tomorrow morning we'll figure out what to do. Is there anything we can do to help? Rita asked. Since we're here. I looked around. The house was big 6 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a spacious kitchen. Not luxurious, but comfortable and cozy. Hubert and I had always dreamed of having a big family. For starters, I said, we need to organize the sleeping quarters and something to cook for dinner. To my surprise, they immediately got to work. Ollie and Thomas started to arrange the furniture in the living room to make room for the mattresses. Rita came with me to the kitchen to help with dinner. The rest of us spread out around the house, who helped with the cleaning, who put things away. Did you work as a cook? I asked Rita, noticing how deftly she was chopping vegetables. 22 years in the cafeteria at St. Mary's School. She nodded. Until the school closed and I was laid off. Finding a new job at my age wasn't hard to find a new job at my age. I nodded understandingly. Where did you live before all this? I rented an apartment on Elm Street. When I lost my job, I kept my savings for a while. Then I had to sell my car. Then I had to sell the furniture. Eventually, she couldn't make the rent. Her story sounded frighteningly ordinary. How easy it is to lose everything. For dinner, Rita and I made a big pot of chili and rice. It turned out I had enough food in my pantry and freezer to feed everyone. Over dinner, which we ate in the living room, the kitchen table was too small for such company. I learned more about my unexpected guests. Ollie used to teach college literature until he lost his job due to layoffs. Thomas was a construction worker, injured on the job and lost his housing when the money ran out. Spouses Nelson and Doris lost their home due to medical bills. Doris had cancer and insurance didn't cover all the costs. Each story was unique, but with a common thread: how quickly one can end up on the streets, how thin the line between a normal life and homelessness. After dinner, Jessie, the same hooded girl, asked out of the blue, "What did you do, Mrs. Murphy? Before you retired, I mean." "I was a baker," I replied. "My husband and I owned the Sweet Memories Bakery on Maple Street." Wait a minute. Ollie's eyes widened. That bakery? The one with the caramel rolls and cranberry bread? I smiled, surprised that anyone else remembered. Yes, that's us. Oh my God. Ollie shook his head. Your cinnamon rolls were the best in town. I used to pick them up every morning when I taught at the college. You did? I tried to remember his face, but I couldn't. 25 years in business, we had too many customers. Why did you close? Thomas asked. I sighed. My husband had died. I tried to make it on my own, but without him, it wasn't the same. And then the mall across the street closed, and the flow of customers decreased. In the end, I had to sell. The next morning, I woke up early out of old habit. To my surprise, Rita and Ollie were already in the kitchen. They had made coffee and even found flour and eggs in the pantry. "We thought about breakfast," Rita said, a little embarrassed. "But we didn't know what we could use." "Anything you can find in the pantry," I said with a wave of my hand. "Just leave the coffee for me." They laughed, and suddenly the tension that had been in the air since yesterday dissipated a little. "I could help with the baking," I offered. I hadn't practiced in a while, but I should still have the skills. An hour later, the kitchen was filled with the smell of fresh pancakes. People were waking up and pulling up to the table, passing plates to each other, pouring coffee and orange juice. It reminded me of Sunday breakfasts when the kids still lived with us. Only those people were grateful for every bite, every sip. After breakfast, I expected them to start packing up to leave, but no one was in a hurry. Instead, Ollie asked, "Mrs. Murphy, what do you plan to do about the situation? Your children are unlikely to leave you alone." I wondered. Paisley, Ralph, and Sybil were sure their plan would work, that I couldn't stand having homeless people in my house and would give up. But what if I did the opposite? What if I used the situation against them? "I have an idea," I said, "but I'm going to need your help." By noon, the plan had matured. I decided to turn the situation upside down. Instead of resisting the presence of these people, I would make them my allies. "I have some equipment from the bakery in my basement," I explained. "A small oven, mixers, molds, everything that wasn't sold with the business. If we set up a mini bakery right here, we could make money for food and other necessities." "But who will buy?" Thomas asked, scratching the back of his head. "The neighbors," I smiled. "There isn't a good bakery in this neighborhood. The nearest one is at the mall, 3 miles away. And I know the locals love fresh baked goods for breakfast." "But is that legal?" Doris was worried. "We'll be baking for friends and acquaintances," I said. "Donations, not sales. As long as we don't exceed a certain volume, it's perfectly legal." With an enthusiasm I hadn't expected, they began to help. Thomas and Vince came down to the basement with me and lifted the equipment. Rita and Doris sorted through the pantry, making a list of ingredients. Ollie suggested we go to the store. He knew where we could buy groceries in bulk for a good price. By evening, we had turned most of the kitchen into a mini bakery. We set up the oven in the corner, cleared the countertops to work on, and found old aprons and hubcaps. "What are we going to bake?" Rita asked when all the preparations were finished. "What I do best," I smiled. "Cinnamon and caramel, cranberry bread, chocolate muffins, and, of course, the classic poppy seed buns." We started with a test batch. To my surprise, my hands still remembered all the moves: kneading the dough, shaping the scones, decorating with frosting. It was like coming home after a long absence. While the first batch was baking, I called a few neighbors, those I knew well enough, told them I'd decided to get back into baking, and offered to stop by in the morning for a cup of coffee and scones. Jessica Wilson, my neighbor on my right, was thrilled. "Allison, this is wonderful. I've missed your caramel scones so much. I'll be sure to come and bring Mike." Laura and George Summers from across the street promised to stop by, and even Edith Prescott, the old grouch from across the street who usually didn't talk to anyone, agreed to come. The first buns were perfect, golden, puffy, with delicate cinnamon and caramel inside. When I took the tray out of the oven, Ollie inhaled the aroma and smiled. "Just like I remembered. Wonderful." All night we took turns baking. I demonstrated the basics, and my new helpers took it in stride. Rita especially excelled at frosting, and Thomas had a talent for kneading dough. In the morning, when the first neighbors arrived, the kitchen was filled with trays of freshly baked goods, and the aroma of cinnamon and vanilla wafted through the air. Jessica and Mike Wilson were the first to arrive, bringing a thermos of coffee. They were surprised to see so many strangers in my house, but I introduced everyone as friends helping me with a new project. When Jessica tasted the scone, her eyes closed with pleasure. God, Allison, this is divine, just like it used to be. I've missed your baking so much. Soon other neighbors pulled up as well. Some heard from acquaintances. Others just walked by and smelled the aroma. By 9 a.m., the kitchen was full of people laughing, chatting, enjoying the baked goods. How much do I owe? Edith Prescott asked, finishing her second bun. It's not a sale, Edith, I smiled. Just a friendly get-together. Nonsense, the old woman snorted. I don't take handouts. How much is a bun at the bakery? $2? $3? Here, she put a $5 bill on the table. And I'll take another one with me for Fred. The other neighbors followed suit. Some left money, others brought something in return: a jar of homemade jam, fresh eggs from her brother's farm, a bottle of homemade wine. By noon, almost all the baked goods were sold, and the table was filled with a decent amount of money and many gifts from grateful neighbors. Unbelievable, Rita whispered as the last guests left. People really love your baked goods. It was fun, I admitted. I'd forgotten how good it felt to see your food make people happy. We shared a communal lunch of what the neighbors had brought and discussed plans for the future. If we bake every day, we can make enough to cover our groceries and utilities, Ollie said. Maybe even a little more. But we have to figure out a place to live, I reminded him. You can't sleep on the living room floor forever. I have an idea, Thomas said. There's a lot of unused space in the basement. If you don't mind, we could convert it into a shared bedroom. I'm pretty good with electrics, Vince added. I can do the lighting. And I can do drywall, Lucky suggested. And so our little commune was born. Every day we baked for the neighbors, who came in increasing numbers. Word of Mrs. Murphy's return to baking spread through the neighborhood, and soon we had regular customers. Thomas and the other men turned the basement into a cozy dormitory with separate sections for men and women. Vince really turned out to be a talented electrician and installed good lighting. Jessie, the hooded girl, turned out to be an artist and painted the walls with colorful patterns. By the end of the week, our makeshift bakery was operating at full capacity. Rita and I were in charge of baking, Ollie was in charge of purchasing, and the rest of us helped with whatever we could: who kneaded the dough, who decorated the buns, who talked to customers. My caramel cinnamon buns were especially popular. They were sold out in the first hour. Cranberry bread was sold out on weekends, and chocolate muffins became a favorite treat of the children from the neighboring houses. On Friday, Mrs. Hamilton, the president of the local congregation, stopped by. Allison, honey, this is amazing. The whole neighborhood is talking about your baked goods. Thank you, Martha. I smiled, wiping my hands on my apron. Just a little hobby. Hobby? She laughed. This is a real business, and your helpers are so nice. Ollie told me about their situation. She lowered her voice. It's so noble of you to help the homeless. I didn't make it clear that it wasn't my idea in the first place. After all, I was really helping them now, and they were helping me. By the way, Martha continued, we're having a social gathering next Wednesday. Could you bake something for the tea party? I'd love to, I nodded. She hesitated. Perhaps you could tell me about your initiative. A lot of people would like to know more. Perhaps other neighborhoods would like to participate in similar projects as well. I agreed, albeit with some embarrassment. Our initiative was born out of my children's revenge, but turned into something real, worthwhile. When Martha left, I tallied up the proceeds for the week. After deducting ingredient costs, there was a decent amount left. What are we going to do with the profit? Ollie asked. Split it evenly, I suggested. Some of it for the next purchase, some for improving the house, and the rest for each of them for their personal needs. They were shocked by my suggestion. But it's your house, your recipes, Rita objected. And you are my partners, I replied. I couldn't have done it without you. That evening, sitting in the living room, surrounded by people I hadn't even known a week before, I realized that this sense of community, of togetherness, of doing something together, was something I'd missed since Hubert's death. And how ironic that I had gained it through the cruel plan of my own children. It's been 10 days since my children brought the homeless into my home, 10 days that have completely changed my life. I went from being a lonely widow to the center of a small but tight-knit community. Our makeshift bakery was gaining popularity by the day. Neighbors came not only for the baked goods, but also just to chat, have a cup of coffee, and share news. Many of them now knew Ollie, Rita, and the others by name. That morning we were preparing for a particularly large batch. Mrs. Hamilton had ordered 3 dozen cinnamon rolls and 2 cranberry breads for a social gathering. I was standing at the table rolling out the dough when Jessie, who was on duty at the window, suddenly exclaimed, "Mrs. Murphy, I think you have visitors." I went to the window and saw the familiar cars: Paisley's black SUV, Ralph's red sports car, and Sybil's blue Mini Cooper. All three were parked on the sidewalk, and my kids, clearly excited, were heading toward the house. "Shit," I muttered. "Showing up." "Your kids?" Rita wiped her hands on her apron. I nodded. Apparently, they'd realized their plan hadn't worked and had come to see why I hadn't already called begging to be rescued. "Do you want us to leave?" Thomas asked. "No." I shook my head firmly. "Stay. This is our home and our bakery." When the doorbell rang, I didn't open it. I let them wait on the porch for a minute or two before I went to the door. There were all three of them: Paisley in the front with a tense face, Ralph behind her, and Sybil, as usual, with the telephone in his hand. "Mom!" Paisley stepped forward. "Why didn't you answer our calls? We were worried." I shrugged, not inviting them in. "As you can see, I'm alive and well. May I come in?" Ralph tried to look over my shoulder. "Or do you only take in your new friends?" I stepped aside. "Come in, just don't interfere with the work." Their faces stretched as they entered the house and smelled the aroma of fresh baked goods. From the kitchen came voices, laughter, the clinking of dishes, the sounds of activity. "What's going on in here?" Paisley asked as we walked into the living room. "Why are they still here?" "They are?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean my companions?" "Companions?" Ralph laughed. "Mom, they're homeless people we brought in to make you so I'd be scared and agree to your terms." I finished for him. "Yeah, I remember the plan, only it didn't work." Paisley cast a quick glance toward the kitchen, where Rita's laughter was coming from, and then turned to me. "Mom, this is getting absurd. You let 20 strangers into your house?" 18, I corrected, "and they're not strangers anymore. I know everyone's name, their stories, their talents." "So what are you doing?" Sybil put the phone down, showing interest in what was happening for the first time. "Where's that smell coming from?" "We're baking." I shrugged, as if it were the most common thing in the world. Buns, bread, muffins, for the neighbors. My kids looked at me as if I'd told them I'd decided to go to the moon. "You bake?" Ralph asked. "For the neighbors? With the homeless?" "With my companions," I corrected him again. "And yes, things are going great. We already have regular customers." "Clients?" Paisley frowned. "You're selling baked goods? No license, no business registration, no health inspections?" "We don't sell," I smiled. "We treat friends and acquaintances, and they leave donations. It's all perfectly legal." At that moment, Ollie came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands with a towel. "Mrs. Murphy, the first batch is ready. Re." He hesitated when he saw my kids. "Oh, you have company. I apologize for the intrusion." "It's okay, Ollie," I introduced him. "This is Oliver Coleman, my chief assistant. Ollie, these are my children, Paisley, Ralph, and Sybil. Ollie nodded politely. It's a pleasure to meet you. Your mother is an amazing woman. Her talent for baking is incredible. Paisley ignored the compliment. Mom, can I talk to you privately? I shook my head. Anything you want to say, you can say in front of Ollie. We don't have secrets. Her eyes narrowed. Okay, then I'll be blunt. It's illegal. You can't turn an apartment building into a homeless shelter and an underground bakery. Actually, you can, Ollie interjected. As long as the number of occupants doesn't exceed a certain number and they're considered guests, not tenants, the law doesn't prohibit the landlady from hosting anyone. Are you a lawyer? Paisley asked sarcastically. Yes, actually, Ollie replied calmly. 27 years of practicing housing law before I lost my license due to personal problems. But I do remember the laws. Paisley fell silent, clearly not expecting that answer. Ralph took advantage of the pause. All right, Mom, let's be honest. What do you want? Money? We can negotiate more favorable terms. I laughed. Money? Ralph, darling. I make enough. Maybe not as much as you do on your stock exchange, but we make enough. For what? He snorted. For flour and eggs? And taxes on the house? Utility bills? Insurance? It's all paid for, I shrugged. I had savings, and now I had an income. Sybil, who had been silently filming our conversation on her phone, suddenly lowered her hand. Wait, you're actually making money from this pastry hobby? It's not a hobby, Sybil, I corrected her. It's a business, small, home-based, but very successful. Turns out people missed my baked goods. The timer chimed in the kitchen, and I turned to Ollie. It's the second batch. I'll go check it out. When I got back to the kitchen, the work was in full swing. Rita was taking the buns out of the oven. Doris and Jessie were preparing the glaze. Thomas was kneading another batch of dough. They were quiet for a moment when they saw me. It's okay, I assured them. Just family talk. Are they mad? Rita asked. More like shocked, I grinned. Their plan hadn't gone as they'd expected. I went back into the living room, where my children were arguing quietly. When I came in, they were silent. Mom, Paisley began in her professional tone, we're worried. What is happening cannot continue. It's a matter of safety, health, legality. How? I sat back in my chair, ready for a long conversation. Name specific violations. Well, first of all, sanitary norms. She began to curl her fingers. A home kitchen is not intended for commercial use. Second, fire safety. Too many people in one room. Third, zoning. This neighborhood is meant for residential homes, not businesses. I nodded as I listened to her arguments. Keep going. Fourth, taxes. She started talking faster. You don't record income, you don't pay sales tax. Fifth, labor. These people work without contracts, without insurance. What else? I asked when she paused. Isn't that enough? Paisley waved her hands. Mom, if we report you to the proper authorities, you'll be fined thousands of dollars, or worse. I stood up calmly and walked over to the bookcase. I pulled out a folder and handed it to Paisley. Open it. She took the folder with suspicion, as if it might be a bomb, and slowly opened it. Inside were documents, neatly filed, stamped, and signed. What are these? She asked, looking at the first page. Registration for a nonprofit organization called Sweet Memories Shelter and Community Bakery. I smiled, seeing her expression change. The next document was a permit from the fire department. Next, a sanitation permit. Then, confirmation that the process of changing the zoning to partially utilize the space for charitable purposes had begun. And finally, contracts with volunteers. Paisley flipped through the documents with growing amazement. How? When did you get all this done? Ollie helped. I nodded toward the kitchen. He may have lost his license, but he still had connections and knowledge. And Martha Hamilton, the community president, she loves my cinnamon buns and has influence in the mayor's office. Ralph whistled. Wow, Mom, you've really thought of everything. Naturally, I shrugged. I wasn't going to risk this project. It's too important, both to me and to my friends. Friends, Sybil echoed, glancing toward the kitchen, where the sounds of work and soft laughter were coming from. Do you really call them that? What else? I was genuinely surprised. We live together, work together, support each other. Isn't that friendship? The doorbell rang, and I went to open it. Mrs. Hamilton stood on the doorstep with three other members of the community council. Allison, darling, we're here to pick up the order for the meeting. Is it ready? Almost, Martha. I invited them in. The last batch is just about ready. Would you like some coffee while you wait? I'd love some. Mrs. Hamilton and her companions walked into the living room, where they froze when they saw my children. Oh, you have guests? My children, I introduced them. They've come to visit. Martha blossomed. How wonderful! They must be so proud of you and your initiative. The whole neighborhood is talking about your project. Paisley opened her mouth, obviously about to say something, but I quickly intervened. Coffee will be here in a minute. Please make yourself comfortable. I went into the kitchen, leaving the children alone with Martha and her co-workers, who immediately began to rave about the impact of my charitable initiative on the community. 20 minutes later, when I returned with a tray filled with fresh scones, the living room was a strange atmosphere. Mrs. Hamilton and her companions were chatting animatedly, while my children sat with strained smiles, clearly feeling out of place. Here are the treats. I put the tray on the table. Rita's bringing coffee now. Divine! Exclaimed one of Martha's companions as she inhaled the aroma. Allison, you're a real magician. I have a great team, I replied modestly. As the board members received their order and left, never ceasing to marvel at the baked goods and the project, my children looked completely confused. Do they really believe this is all your charity initiative? Sybil asked. That you're out of the goodness of your heart to shelter the homeless? Didn't they? I shrugged. Maybe it was originally your idea to bring them here to annoy me, but the decision to keep them and create this project was mine. Paisley gathered the documents back into the folder. Well, it looks like you've thought it through, but it doesn't solve the underlying problem. What problem? I leaned against the door jamb. The house, she looked me in the eye. It's still standing on a nice piece of land. Sooner or later, you're going to have to decide what to do with it. I've already decided, I said calmly. I'll live here with my friends and continue our project. And when the time comes, well, Ollie and I have already discussed the legal aspects. What does that mean? Ralph was concerned. It means I'm revising my will, I said bluntly. And the house will probably go to the nonprofit organization Sweet Memories, not to you. There was silence in the room. My kids looked at me like I had just announced I was going to Mars. You can't, Paisley finally said. It's our inheritance. The one you wanted when I was alive, I reminded her. By demanding that I pay rent on my own house, or threatening to declare me incompetent. We just wanted, Ralph began. Money, I finished for him. You wanted money, but you know what? I found something more valuable. Purpose, community, friends, and I wouldn't trade that for your approval or your plans for my house. Sybil stood up, nervously fixing her hair. You can't be serious. These people, they're strangers, and we are your children. The kids who brought 20 homeless people into my house, hoping I'd get scared and give up? I shook my head. You know what? You got what you wanted. I'm not alone in this big house anymore. There's a family here now, just not the one you were hoping for. Paisley stood up, her face stony. This isn't the last word in this case, Mom. We will fight for our inheritance. You have the right, I nodded. But be warned, all the documents are in order. I'm perfectly competent, and I have witnesses, respected members of the community, who will confirm that I'm of sound mind. They left, all three of them, with different expressions on their faces. Paisley with cold fury, Ralph with disbelief, Sybil with something akin to confusion. I stood at the door, watching them get into their expensive cars and drive away. Ollie came over and stood next to me. Are you okay? Yeah, I sighed. But it's not over yet. They'll be back. Legally, they don't stand a chance. He put his hand on my shoulder. All the documents are in order. The organization is legally registered. Your legal capacity is unquestionable. It's not about the legal side, Ollie. I shook my head. It's the fact that my own children are willing to fight me for money. It hurts. I know, he said quietly. But you know what? You have us now, and we're on your side. I smiled, looking at the road my kids had just taken. Yes, I have you. And, it's worth it. The summons came exactly 2 weeks after the kids' visit. I was just finishing decorating a new batch of cupcakes when Jessie brought an envelope. A registered letter, Mrs. Murphy, she said, holding it out to me. It looked official. I wiped my hands on my apron and took the envelope. Seeing the county courthouse logo, I already knew what was inside. My kids didn't waste any time. Bad news? Ollie asked, noticing the change in my face. I've been subpoenaed. I showed the paper. Paisley, Ralph, and Sybil had filed a lawsuit to declare me incompetent and demand that a guardian be appointed to administer my estate. Rita gasped. How can they? You're their mother. It's not about me. I folded the paper back into the envelope. It's about the house and the land. They want control so they can sell it all. What are we going to do? Thomas asked. Fight, of course. I squared my shoulders. Ollie, can you help me prepare? I know you can't represent me officially, but your advice is invaluable. Of course, he nodded. We'll need medical certificates to prove your legal capacity, witnesses to testify to your adequacy and reasonableness, documents for a nonprofit organization, and, of course, a good lawyer. I have a friend, Leonard Price. He's old but experienced and reliable. The next few days were spent in preparation. We didn't shut down the bakery. On the contrary, I wanted as many neighbors as possible to see our project in action. Ollie contacted Leonard, and together they developed a defense strategy. I underwent medical examinations with 3 different specialists, including a psychiatrist. All reports were unequivocal. I am fully capable and adequate. Martha Hamilton and other members of the community agreed to testify. Even Edith Prescott, that grumpy neighbor, volunteered to testify in my favor, and she was famous for not approving of anyone or anything. The first hearing was scheduled for Tuesday. I put on my best dress, the dark blue one with the white collar that Hubert had always loved, and went to court with Leonard. Ollie, Rita, and the others wanted to come with me, but I decided it might look like an attempt at pressure. At the courthouse, I saw my children for the first time in many weeks. They were sitting on the opposite side of the room, Paisley in a strict business suit, Ralph in an expensive jacket, Sybil in a fancy dress. Next to them was a young lawyer with a cocky look. Ready? Leonard asked, shaking my hand. More than ready, I nodded. When the hearing began, my children's attorney presented arguments to the court. I was an elderly woman with clear evidence of irrational behavior. He cited as evidence that I had turned my home into a homeless shelter, run an illegal food business, endangered myself by being around questionable individuals, and displayed irrational hostility toward my own children who only wanted to keep me safe. Mrs. Murphy should be in a safe place, under professional supervision, he concluded, and her financial affairs should be managed by the people who really care about her well-being, her children. When it was Leonard's turn, he rose slowly. At nearly 80, he still looked imposing. Your Honor, he began, the nature of this case is simple. Three adults want to deprive their mother of the right to dispose of her property. Not because she's incapacitated, the medical reports I've presented clearly prove that. Not because she's putting herself in danger. The nonprofit organization she founded is completely legal and passes all background checks. It's because she refuses to do what they want her to do. Sell the house she's lived in all her life. He methodically refuted every argument of the opposing side, presented medical reports, documents for the nonprofit organization, and permits from the health and fire departments. Then it was the witness's turn. Martha Hamilton spoke about the positive impact our bakery has on the community. Edith Prescott, to everyone's surprise, gave a fiery speech about my mental clarity and entrepreneurial skills. Even Dr. Jenkins, the same doctor my children referred to, stated that he believed I was completely capable. When it was my turn to testify, I felt strangely calm, as if everything that had happened was the inevitable conclusion to a long story. Mrs. Murphy, Judge Benson, an elderly man with kind eyes, said to me, "Please tell me why you decided to set up a shelter and bakery in your home." I thought for a moment. It wasn't my idea originally, Your Honor. My children brought these people to my house, hoping I would be afraid and agree to sell it. But instead of fear, I found what I had lost years ago: a purpose, a community, a sense of belonging. These people my children call questionable personalities have become my friends. We support each other, work together, help each other become better people. Is this irrational behavior? The judge asked a few more questions about my health, my financial situation, my relationship with my children. I answered honestly, not trying to sugarcoat or denigrate the situation. After 3 hours of hearing, the judge adjourned for a decision. Leonard and I waited in the hallway. My children sat on the opposite side, not looking in my direction. "What do you think our chances are?" I asked Leonard. "Pretty good." He patted my hand. "Judge Benson is known for his fairness, and we have a very strong case." When the hearing resumed, Judge Benson took a long look at the papers in front of him before he spoke. The case of Allison Murphy's incapacity and appointment of a guardian is one of the most unusual in my practice. On the one hand, I see an elderly woman who opened her home to the needy and created a successful charity. On the other are her three children who claim to be doing this out of concern for their mother. However, having considered all the evidence and listened to the witnesses, I must reach a conclusion. He paused, and there was complete silence in the room. "I find no basis for finding Mrs. Murphy incompetent. On the contrary, her actions demonstrate rational thought, enterprise, and concern for the public good. Therefore, the suit is dismissed. Mrs. Murphy retains all rights to manage her estate and make decisions." I exhaled a sigh of relief. Leonard shook my hand firmly. And across the hall, I could see the shock on my children's faces. As we were leaving the courtroom, Paisley caught up with me in the hallway. "Mom, this isn't over. We're going to appeal." I stopped and turned to her. "Why, Paisley? What do you hope to accomplish?" "Justice," she blurted out. "You're giving your house, our inheritance, to strangers." "I'm not giving away my home. I'm sharing it with those who need it and creating something useful." I shook my head. "When did you become like this, Paisley? When did money become more important to you than anything else?" "It's not about the money." She lowered her voice. "It's about principle. You choose other people over your own children." "No, Paisley. You and your brother and sister chose money over your own mother." I turned away and walked toward the exit. There was a support group waiting for me on the courthouse porch: Ollie, Rita, Thomas, and a few others from our commune. They rushed toward me with questions. "It's okay," I smiled. "We had won." That same day, I met with Leonard in his office to discuss the next steps. They can indeed appeal, he said, but the chances of success are minimal. After such a clear ruling from Judge Benson, I want to rewrite the will, I interrupted him. Today. Leonard looked at me carefully. Are you sure, Ellie? It's a big step. I'm more than sure, I nodded. I want the house to go to a nonprofit organization called Sweet Memories when I die, so that it can continue to serve those who need it. And your children? I'll leave them the money from my accounts. Split it evenly. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. I sighed. I don't want to completely disinherit them. I just can't trust them with the house and what we've built. Leonard nodded. I'll prepare the paperwork. That evening I returned home. All of ours were already waiting in the living room, excited, ready to celebrate the victory. They'd arranged a little surprise. They'd baked a huge cake that said, Our Allison, and decorated the room with homemade garlands. We're so proud of you, Rita said, hugging me. You're a real fighter. I couldn't have done it without all of you. I looked around the room. You gave me strength and a reason to fight. We celebrated the victory with a modest dinner. There was laughter, toasts to the future, plans to expand the bakery. I looked at those faces so different, with such disparate stories, but united by a common purpose, and felt a warmth I hadn't felt since Hubert's death. The next morning, as we were getting ready for our usual day of work, there was a persistent knock on the door. On the doorstep stood all three of my children. Paisley looked determined, Ralph looked annoyed, and Sybil looked embarrassed. We need to talk, Paisley said. Alone. I let them into the house and led them into my study, the only room that was mine alone. Leonard said you rewrote your will, Paisley began as soon as the door closed. Is that true? I didn't deny it. Yes, and you're leaving the house to these people? Ralph didn't hide his indignation. Instead of your own children? I'm leaving the house to a nonprofit organization I created, I corrected him. And yes, one of the goals of that organization is to help the homeless, but it will also continue the bakery, provide jobs for those who need them, and serve the community. What about us? Sybil asked quietly. What's left for us? The money in my accounts, divided into 3 equal parts. I sat down at the table. It's not as much as you could get from selling the house, but it's still a substantial sum. You're trading us for strangers. Paisley crossed her arms over her chest. Your own children for a group of homeless people you've only known for a month. I took a deep breath. No, Paisley, I'm not changing you. I'm just not letting you destroy something that has value to me for money. You wanted to sell the house I've lived in all my life. You charged me rent for the right to live in my own home. You brought homeless people here to scare me. You tried to have me declared incompetent by the courts. It's all about money. It wasn't just the money, Ralph countered. We were worried about you. This house is too big. It's hard for you to maintain. That's not true. I shook my head. I was doing fine, and I'm doing even better now, with the help of my new friends. You wanted the money you'd get from selling the house. Nothing more. There was silence. I looked at my children, so beautiful, so successful on the outside, and so empty on the inside. When did you stop caring about me as a person? I asked quietly. When did I become just a valuable asset to you? Do you remember how I used to read you bedtime stories, baking cookies for school fairs, sitting by your bedside at night, Ralph, when you had a sore throat? How did I help you, Sybil, make your costume for the school play? How did she support you, Paisley, when you were studying for your law school entrance exams? I could see their faces change, a shadow of shame mixed with stubbornness. My father and I have given you all these years, time, energy, love, and in the end, as soon as you smelled money, you turned into vultures circling the prey. That's not fair, Paisley started, but I raised my hand to stop her. No, it's not unfair at all. You know what the sad part is? That you don't even want the money. You, Paisley, have a successful law practice. You, Ralph, have a high-paying job in the stock market. You, Sybil, have thousands of subscribers and advertising contracts. You're all well off, but you're still not enough. And these people you despise have lost everything: their jobs, their homes, often their families, but they haven't lost their humanity. They care for each other, they help, they support each other. They are grateful for every little thing. They work hard to earn their place here. And you know what? They are more like a family than you three have been in recent years. I turned and looked at the kids. I'm not going to change my will decision. The house will stay with the organization. You'll get the money. That's all I can give you. If you can accept that and want to repair our relationship, I'm open. But if you're here to convince me to change my mind or threaten more lawsuits, don't waste your time. My decision is final. Ralph stood up, his face turning purple. You'll regret this, Mom. We won't stop. You're right, Ralph, I nodded. I already do. I regret that your father and I raised you like this, that we didn't teach you to appreciate what's really important. Sybil stood up too, her eyes glistening with tears. I don't understand you, Mother. Why are you doing this to us? I'm not doing anything to you, Sybil. I'm doing what's right for me and for the people who need help. If you really cared about me, you'd be glad I found a new meaning to life. Paisley, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. You chose them over us. Well, live with that choice. She headed for the door. Let's go. There's nothing more to do here. They left without looking back. I stood at the window, watching them get into their expensive cars and drive away, perhaps forever. The office door creaked quietly. I turned around and saw Ollie standing on the doorstep with a cup of tea in his hands. Are you okay? He asked, handing me the cup. I will be. I accepted the tea. Thank you. Are they coming back? I don't know, I answered honestly. I'm not sure I want them to. Maybe one day they'll understand. Maybe they won't. We left the study and returned to the kitchen, where work was in full swing. Rita was rolling out the dough, Thomas was mixing the icing, and Jessie was decorating the finished scones. Just an ordinary day in our extraordinary family. You know, I said to Ollie as I watched the scene, sometimes you lose something precious to find something priceless. Very true, he smiled. Ready to get back to work? I put on my apron and stood next to Rita. Always ready. We've got a lot of buns ahead of us.